It's a crime, and it's a crime for which you can go to prison.
It's not right. And when's this going to end in New Mexico?
It is troubling. Any misuse of public money is troubling.
The dollars involved are staggering. Public money earmarked for student-athlete programs has been quietly diverted to personal use.
And yet, nobody noticed. Not UNM's administration and not the auditors.
Exhibit number 1, the UNM credit card issued to former athletic director Paul Krebs.
UNM's athletic department has been battling a budget deficit for years, but you wouldn't know it by looking at Paul Krebs's credit card usage. Now, New Mexico policy dictates that any expenditure must be for a public purpose and have a public benefit. However, a News 13 investigation finds former athletic director Paul Krebs diverted tens of thousands of public dollars to benefit his friends and family. The expenditures were not related to his job duties or responsibilities.
UNM picked up the $6,000 tab, which included several $1,000s for tickets, airfare, $968 for Paul's hotel room, and another $1,900 for his brother's hotel room. That's right, Paul stuck the public with his brother Fred's hotel expenses. It was a family affair. Paul's wife got a seat, so did Paul's brothers and his children. UNM VP David Harris got tickets, so did Regent Rob Doty, as well as Assistant AD Ed Montanarez and his 3 children. Half of the tickets in Paul Krebs' stash were distributed to an elite group of Lobo Club bigwigs and donors. Since 2015, the public has shelled out more than $4 grand for Krebs and his wife to attend National College Football Championship games. Then there was the $373 charge for the AD to play golf in Las Vegas, Nevada. And then there's the thousands of dollars UNM pays to Paul's wife. A provision in Krebs' $1 million contract allows the AD's spouse to travel to, quote, athletic events at university expense.
Neighbors here are no strangers to crime. They say the Sahara Motel is a magnet for it.
They spend a lot of time. APD spends a lot of time over here.
Our neighbors are very afraid that they are going to get shot.
Those concerns keep Carmen Pennington busy. As editor of the Elder Homestead Neighborhood Association newsletter and a longtime resident of the area,
we have been here 40-some years.
We've worked with the owner here for 2 years now to address problems, but it just doesn't seem like the management and the ownership is able or willing to do the work. It's a sore spot and it's creating a lot of crime and a lot of problems, and quite frankly, our patience is just done.
Davis wrote a letter earlier this month asking the city's legal department to file a complaint in court to deem the motel a public nuisance and shut it down.
The letter shows APD got at least 193 calls to the motel here just in the first 8 months of the year. It averages more than 5 calls a week, and in some weeks, APD has gotten as many as 10.
What we've seen is things that we feel are pretty questionable.
This is very important stuff. This is public safety.
We don't think that's right on behalf of the taxpayers.
It's a city of Albuquerque expense so obscure, only a handful of people know about it, yet it's costing taxpayers millions of dollars. It involves the state's largest utility. A News 13 investigation finds P&M is accused of gouging taxpayers with inflated bills and excessive charges.
For example, when a motorist crashed into a light pole on 12th Street, P&M repaired the damage, then invoiced the city $4,400. When thieves stole the copper wiring from a pole on Coors, P&M's repair bill was $20,000.
They've turned her into an urban legend. I always felt like, oh, she's going to come walking in the door at any time. People know the name, A lot of times they don't know what it is, they just know to be afraid of it.
It is what happened on the afternoon of September 20th, 1988, on a rural highway south of Belen. 19-year-old college student Tara Calico vanished.
About 50 yards from there, we did find some bicycle tracks that matched the type of bike she was riding.
After that 2005 interviews with the Sheriff's Department, it started again. The threats, the anonymous phone calls to my phone. They knew that Tara Calico rode her bike from rural communities straight over all the way up to the train tracks.
That podcast now being shared around the country. Hollywood stars and many others joining the fight, justice for Tara.
We're actually making progress, and the more national attention we bring to this, the sooner we can bring her home.
Oh, I'm sure there would have been a shooting over that.
I think it's egregious.
Should he, as a sheriff, know better?
It's a cardinal sin in cattle country, and the top lawman in New Mexico's smallest county is the culprit. Harding County Sheriff Raymond Gutierrez, a man elected to uphold the law, is also convicted of a crime, and it's one that's plagued ranchers in New Mexico for more than a century. The sheriff was found guilty of injuring fence and livestock trespassing. His punishment, a year of probation and $1,600 in fines.
The suspect in this case almost got away with murder.
Yes, he did.
He pointed out where he buried the body.
We have a kidnapping, we have a ransom, which ultimately leads to a shallow grave and a murder. It doesn't get much more dynamic than that.
No, Mr. Nichols, you didn't kill Thompson. But you did, Mr. Wells.
Yes! Yes, I killed Ned Thompson! I killed him! I killed him! I killed him! I killed him!
That's how Hollywood solves murder cases, but it never happens that way in the real world. Go behind the scenes of an actual police investigation, and you get a sense of what homicide detectives are truly up against.
The female witness said one day in November she drove with Casey Ramirez to Shane and Renee Foster's Los Lunas home. Ramirez went inside. She waited in the car. Something happened in the Foster home. Was it murder? Investigators had enough for a search warrant.
This, I think, was the largest amount of money and the biggest conspiracy that I have ever seen in New Mexico related to the misuse of public funds.
This case was about greed.
It was such a surprise. It was a huge shock, like a hurricane dropped on you with no notice.
It was crooked politics at its worst and involved millions of stolen dollars. High-ranking government officials and respected businessmen engaged in a high-stakes game of bribery, kickbacks, and fraud. You don't have to look very far for the scene of the crime. It's across the street. Between 1999 and 2004, a corrupt gang of thieves siphoned more than $4.3 million from the construction of the Metropolitan Courthouse. The cast of characters reads like a who's who of New Mexico politics and business. But 18 months later, Aragon sang a different tune. After pleading guilty, he was sentenced to 5.5 years in a federal penitentiary and fined $87,000. The U.S. attorney called Aragon the godfather of public corruption. Construction manager Michael Murphy owed $20,000 in restitution. That money has now been repaid. Subcontractor Manuel Guerra also has refunded the $100,000 he stole. Raul Parr's restitution was $600,000, which he has paid. Sandra Martinez was ordered to return $106,000. She still owes $5,800. Manny Aragon is on the hook for $1.1 million. He still owes $430,000 in restitution and the $87,000 fine. The Metro Courthouse construction was completed in 2004. The Gang of Eight were sentenced in 2009.
You will probably scream a lot, and that is exactly what I want you to do. It's what turns me on.
It's a scene people in Elephant Butte will never forget.
Unbelievable. It was just crazy.
We were shocked.
The shock only grew as David Parker Ray's tales of torture and murder emerged, along with the secrets of what he called his toy box, a trailer filled with surgical tools, video cameras, even a gynecological chair wired to shock his victims. Darren White was the secretary of the Department of Public Safety at the time.
It didn't take long for everyone to know that we were dealing with perhaps one of the most sick and twisted people in New Mexico history.
Just around the corner from the lake, the property is for sale.
The chamber was parked kind of where that propane tank is in that area.
Though Ray talked about burying bodies, he was not a convicted killer. Before dying of a heart attack in 2002, he was convicted of kidnapping and sexually torturing women, just like his lesser-known accomplice and girlfriend, Cindy Hindy.
Were you involved in any way?
No.
Who made this? How did it wind up in northern New Mexico? What does it mean?
For Louis Cerna, it's one of New Mexico's great unsolved mysteries.
It had some meaning to somebody.
New Mexico's first known settlers were European, but Louis thinks someone else made the pillar. He thinks settlers and fur trappers may have thought it was sacred ground and buried people near the stone.
Mistakes were made, and to regain the trust of the public is extremely difficult.
This is by far the most challenging facility we have.
The way we do business in New Mexico needs to change. This is not the way government is supposed to work.
Think majestic. Think spectacular. Think monumental. It's the Taj Mahal, one of the most iconic buildings in the world.
Hidden away in a small mountain community is New Mexico's own version of the Taj Mahal. In fact, this building is 10,000 square feet bigger. And while the Taj Mahal draws millions of tourists a year, no one visits here. You see, this isn't a monument to grandeur, it's a monument to waste.
After the county's crumbling courthouse was condemned because of safety hazards, commissioners hit up the legislature to fund construction of a new government center in Mora. Armed with $5 million, the commission hired architect Antonio Ortega to draw up plans. But instead of designing a $5 million building, Ortega cranked out plans for a 44,000 square foot, $12 million Rolls-Royce courthouse. The build-out for county offices and a magistrate court will occupy about half of the existing building. The other half will be walled off. Future expansion will just have to wait for another time.
Hopefully in a year, 2 years, the story is going to be that the Mora County Courthouse is a fine public building serving the public interest and the public need the way that it was intended to.
Larry Barker, KRQE News 13.
I just think it's a horrible situation.
How could this have gone on so long?
We all are just devastated over what's going on up here.
Tucked away in the northeastern New Mexico town of Springer is a sad place where folks come to pay respects and for quiet reflection.
But don't be deceived by this peaceful scene. You see, there's something terribly wrong here at the Springer Cemetery, and you won't find any clues among the irregular rows of tombstones.
Springer's town council is negotiating to purchase adjacent land for a new cemetery. And while the politicians point fingers to assess blame, it's these volunteers who must console the grieving victims at a country graveyard that is not as peaceful as it seems.
When you think of what's going on here at this cemetery, what goes through your mind?
I just want to cry. Somebody has to stand up for those people and the families that are in the ground.
It's a very sad situation. They're our ancestors, and they deserve the respect that we can give them.
Larry Barker, KRQE News 13.